Proverbs chapter 4, picking up at verse 20. We're going to read three verses. Proverbs chapter 4, verse 20. If you're at home, follow along on the screen. If you're in the sanctuary, your device, follow along on the screen. Here's what it says. My son, pay attention to what I say. Turn your ear to my words. Do not let them out of your sight. Keep them within your heart. For they are life to those who find them, and health to one's whole body. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Amen. Have your seat. Help me share the title of this new sermon series that we're starting today with somebody next to you. Tell neighbor, oh neighbor, please don't stunt my growth. You might not need a neighbor to say it to. You might need to say it to yourself. Don't stunt my growth. One thing that I believe all of us can agree on is that no two of us are the same. We all are different. We come from different places. We all have different experiences. Those experiences cause us all to think differently about the world. We have different opinions, a lot of different opinions. We're all different. And at the same time, there are certain things that all of us have in common. For one thing, each of us has a natural or a physical part of us, even as we also have a spiritual part of us. There's a natural physical you, and then there's a spirit that is you. The physical part is temporary. You will not live in this world forever. But when your natural body is no more, you have a spiritual self that will go somewhere. It makes sense then that we be intentional about making sure that the spiritual you is moving toward God rather than away from God. In every moment of your life, you're in one of those two postures and positions. You're either moving closer to God or you're moving away from God. In other words, spiritual growth is something that should matter to you. It should be your priority. And just to be clear, I'm defining spiritual growth as closeness, proximity, relationship with God. With God, not your career. With God, not your bank account. If you're advancing in your career, but you are not getting closer to God, you are not growing in what matters most. If you earn degrees and get promotions, but you are no closer to God, you are not growing in what matters most. If people know your name, but you are distant from God, you can be known and lonely. And so herein lies the difficulty. Herein lies the difficulty because spiritual growth will always be challenged by natural human urges and desires. You have human urges and desires. And they ain't necessarily spiritual. I can't get no help over here. There are some urges and desires that are connected to your flesh. That have nothing to do with your spirit. And this is why it's tricky. This is why it's difficult, Dion, because power, money, and sex are things that have an existence in and of themselves. They can be handled in a spiritual way. My concern is that you got these natural urges and desires that cause us not to handle these kinds of things in spiritual ways. So we're going to talk a lot in this series about power, money, and sex. Because spiritual growth is always challenged by your natural human urges and desires. Y'all ain't gonna help me, I'm gonna preach it anyway. This is why we cannot talk about growth without talking about power, money, and sex. Our theme for the year is growing together. It sounds so wonderful. It sounds so heavenly. The issue is it has to happen in a context of everyday life. And some of us get access to power, money, and sex, and we can't handle what it is that our flesh is doing to us with regard to these realities. Preach, Pastor. And so power, money, and sex are things that we got to talk about if we're going to talk about growth. Each of them are about more than themselves. In other words, they ain't necessarily bad, but power can be used to advance noble and righteous agendas. But when power is aligned with the demon called pride, and selfishness, then the agenda is no longer about the mission. The agenda becomes about you and your need for domination and your need to be in control and your need to make people listen to you. And so then power and money intertwine because people use their power to get more money at the expense of people who don't have power. Ooh, we're going to get into this more about these power constructs because this is what white privilege is all about. It's about people who have privilege and utilize that privilege and power at the expense of those whose color is different than theirs. Come on, talk to me for just a minute. And so it is with money. How you handle and think about money has implications beyond your financial status. Money in and of itself is not a bad thing, but the demon of money is greed. This is why some people who get a lot of money always want more. This is why people who get money can't handle what they get. I don't know which category you fall in, but money ain't a bad thing. But when it comes partnered with the demon of greed, it can drive a wedge between you and God. Because you think you're doing God a favor when you drop $1 in the bucket. There's power, there's money, and then there's sex. Sex is a gift from God. But you do know that there are people who use power and money and they combine that with sex. And then sex becomes something that is manipulated in such a way that it shows forth the demon of lust. Y'all ain't ready for this. Look, let me just, can we go beneath the surface today? The Easter Sunday service was last week. We going beneath the surface today. Sex is a gift from God, and it's to be utilized and enjoyed in a particular context. But when you utilize sex and lust, and they go together, then all of a sudden power and domination show up. I can't get no help. And it gets to be dangerous. This is why we have to talk about how power, money, and sex impact your growth. My argument is this: the issues of money, power, and sex all combine to target areas and summarize areas with which, if you are not careful, the enemy will use to stunt your growth. We're going to get to each of these matters: power, money, and sex. We're going to get to them. But for purposes of today, in the introduction, in the context, there is something that we have to talk about before we get to any of these things. And that's your heart. We got to talk about your heart. So let's get into this text. When it comes to growth, these verses may be the most powerful prescription that you'll ever receive. The text is written in a paradigm of wisdom, being passed through generations from fathers to sons. Now, wait a minute. For those who just got upset and mad with me and hotter than hot than you already were, because the language of the text is gender specific, I need you to know that throughout the entire book of Proverbs, wisdom itself is characterized as a woman. I wish I had some Bible readers in the house. So exhale. The text anticipates the sharing of information necessary for godly living for all God's children. And the primary message of these verses is this: be careful when you are dealing with things that are familiar. When we think about Jesus, what Jesus did in his ministry was to use critical, crucial issues of the day to highlight the relevance of the gospel for their lives. That's why he spoke in parables. So for those who think that the goal is to come up with a hot sermon topic that involves power, money, and sex so we can draw people to the stream, I need you to correct your thinking. When you think about Jesus, and when I read my Bible, I see Jesus talking about power. And I see Jesus talking about money. I even see Jesus talking about sex. Now, he talked about power a lot. He talked about money a lot. He talked about those more than sex, because during his ministry, sex was not a burning issue. But if Jesus was here in 2023, if the ministry of Jesus was to have been taking place in his person in 2023, can I suggest for you that the paradigm might be reversed and sex might be getting a little more attention? These are issues that have an impact on your growth. But before we get into any of those, I need to have a conversation with you, and I need to give you some basic foundational points out of this text. Number one is this: the biggest obstacle to your growth is really you. It's really you. Verse 20 says, pay attention to what I say. Turn your ear to my words. Pay attention to what I say. Lend ear to my word. Pay attention. Tell somebody, wake up. To what I say. Pay attention to my words. It's like the image I saw on a social media post of a child who was playing outfield in a baseball game. And they got so bored that they started playing with the grass and turning in circles and paying attention to everything but the game. And the coach walks up the side of the field and they say, hey, pay attention. Somebody say, pay attention. Pay attention, because you're in the middle of a situation where something dangerous could happen if you ain't paying attention. We have a spiritual enemy whose work shows itself in the natural realm. And the enemy is more cunning than you realize. I need you to know that in your natural human self, your natural human inclination is proximity to the enemy, not to God. Okay, you don't believe me? Let me give it to you this way. I was born in sin and shapen in iniquity. In other words, what that means is your normal inclination ain't to wake up and all of a sudden be real holy. You ever been walking to the bathroom at night and stub your toe? Might I suggest that what comes out of your mouth in that moment ain't a praise? I wish I had some honest folk in the house. Your normal inclination is in that direction, not in God's direction. So it takes intentionality. It takes purpose. It takes decision. It takes effort to connect with God. It only takes you waking up to be within the reach of the enemy. And so in order for you to grow, you got to first deal with you. Somebody say, I got to deal with me. I got to deal with me. I got issues with my saved self. If you cross me the wrong way, on the wrong day, X, if you come for me, be prepared, because I'm probably going to come for you. I got issues. I got issues with my attitude at times. Mad because I want to be mad. Mad because I feel like being mad. I got issues with certain preconceived notions based on how people dress and how they talk and how they walk and where they hang out and where they live. I got issues. And in order for you to grow, you got to understand that you might be the biggest obstacle you got. So I didn't give you all this. Put up Psalm 139 for me. Put up Psalm 139. This is the reason why I love Psalm 139. You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit down. You know when I rise up. You perceive my thoughts from afar. Oh, my God. That's a scary thought, to know that God knows your thoughts. It's a scary thought to know that God is inside your head. It's a scary thought to know that God knows what makes you tick. It's a scary thing to know that God knows what you wanted to say. I can't get no help up in here, Dion. I'm doing the best I can on a Sunday after Easter. You see me when I'm moving. You know my thoughts. You see me when I'm still. Sometimes when I'm doing a wedding, I remind the couple that in every bride or every groom, there's actually 3 people. there's the person that you think you are. There's the person that they think you are. Then there's the person that you really are. Where are my married folk in here? I need to talk to some married folk for a minute who can help me out and testify to the fact that the spouse that you married ain't the spouse that you thought that you were marrying. And you ain't the spouse that they thought they were marrying. And so both of y'all are in this facade, and yet there's a God who knows who you really are. So when trials and temptations come, you do the best you can, but because you ain't even sure who you are. You ain't even sure about you. You say things that you shouldn't say. You think things that you shouldn't think. You confuse yourself because you was just in church and then you said it and you did it on the way out. I wish I had some help. I wish I had some help up in here. Somebody say, don't stunt my growth, because you're getting in your own way. And so what I want to suggest is that the solution is for you to get to know you better. God ain't changed. He's the same today. He's the same yesterday. He's going to be the same tomorrow. But you kind of fickle. You one way the first 30 seconds of the minute. And the second 30 seconds, you done switched up and become something different. And here's what I shout about. I shout about the fact that God still loves me, even with my crazy self, even with my bad attitude self, even with my nasty self, even with my attitude habits. Is there anybody in the house that can celebrate the fact that I'm loved by God, not because of, but in spite of? And so, good God, I'm working too hard on Sunday after Easter. So what this means is that it may require you to check your theology. Dr. Pete, Dr. Dee, it's good to see y'all. It may require us to check our theology. This is going to make some folk mad. But let me try to explain it, because it's right here in verse 22. The writer says, keep watch on what I show you. Pay attention to what I'm trying to teach you. Because here it is. They are life to those who find them. Here's why some folk are uncomfortable. It's because you've been in church a long time. You've known God a long time. You got a title and a hat and everything. Had it for a long time. And I ain't gonna let nobody tell me that my theology is bad. You do know that there's good theology and there's bad theology. There's that which is true, and then that which people want to make you convinced that it's true because it actually serves their interest. We do this a lot, Thad, with Scripture. We manipulate it and we twist it so that it suits us and so that we don't feel convicted by the foolishness we got going on in our own lives. And we say it's okay with God. And I ain't telling you that your theology is bad. I ain't telling you your theology is wrong. But I am telling you that it might be incomplete. Reason I know that I'm right is because I've learned that there's something that believers and non-believers have in common. They both have a tendency to think that God is too small. That both believers and non-believers think that God is too small. I know I'm right about it because you ain't pray about what you're going through till you got into it and couldn't fix it yourself. There's a tendency to think that God is too small. There's a tendency to think that God is too distant. And so God can love everybody else, but God can't possibly love me. God can show up for everybody else, But with my stuff, God ain't going to show up for me. This is why the writer says, pay attention. What I am teaching you is life to those who, here it is, find them. It's life to those who find these principles, discover these principles. You may not think you're a theologian, but you actually are. Your theology is how you think of God as relates to life. And so there's a theology of everything. You have a theology about everything. And the question that I have for you is, how big is your God? In your theology, with your studied, well-read self, how powerful is your God? In order to grow, you just might have to fill out your theology a little bit. Because your theology determines how you handle everyday life. And when you challenge and question your theology, it puts you in a space like Job. God moves Job from a place where he is well paid and well resourced and healthy to a place where he got no money, no resources, and his family is gone. The question that you ought to ask yourself is, do you trust God in the low place? Is your God as big in the low place as he is when you were shouting about the promotion? I'm teaching better than they talking to me, Jeff, so let me talk to you. Is your God so great that I don't care what it is that they say about me, what it is that they do to me, I'm going to trust God, because I know that he told me that weeping may endure for a night, but I've learned through life that joy will come. I wish I had some help in here. When you question your theology, it puts you in a space where God can engage you on questions that you have. And only he can answer those questions. So there are some things, that y'all sit down, y'all get me excited. There are some things about a person that you will never know unless they tell you. Even folk you think that you're close to, I got a secret for y'all. The folk that you think are your crew for real, you don't even know all the stuff about them. The one on whose finger you put the ring, you ain't even give full disclosure to them. Woo. There are some things about a person that you will never know unless they tell you. Now, you can guess, and you might be right sometimes, but you can't know for sure. You can't know FR. Unless they tell you. And God has been trying to tell you who God is. When you were sick and he got you up, God was trying to tell you that he's a doctor in the sick room. When you had to go to court and the case was pushed aside, God was trying to tell you that he's a lawyer that's never lost a case. When you ended up in divorce and you found joy on the other side, God was trying to tell you that there's something better on the other side. Is there anybody in the house that can testify that God has told you some stuff, shown you some stuff, opened up some doors, made some ways, performed some miracles. And God is trying to tell you that he loves you in spite of you. When you don't love yourself, God still loves you. When you're depressed, God still loves you. When you don't have answers, God still loves. Is there anybody in the house that can give God a 15-second praise for the fact that you got a God who walks with you, who goes before you, who is your battle axe, who fights your battles? Stop making God small. We have a big God, an able God, a powerful God, a present God, a miracle-working God, a way-making God, a providing God, a keeping God. Tell somebody, examine your theology and don't stunt my growth. And so here's the last piece. My God. Here's the last piece. We're going to get to the power of money and the sex over the course of the weeks. But I need you to know that these verses are necessary to remove obstacles for your growth. And here's what you got to do. You got to place a premium on the value of your heart. Place a premium on the value of your heart. Your heart doesn't just refer to the organ. It refers to your will. It's talking about your mind. It's talking about your emotions and your decisions. And your heart is critical because it's the organ through which blood passes to be distributed to your entire body. Stop the heart and you will die. And so the writer says, above all else, above the power, above the money, above the sex, guard your heart. Because all them other things are connected there too. And if your heart is right, there's no good thing that God will withhold from you. God desires that you would prosper and be in good health. But in this life you shall have tribulations. The question is, will you trust God and guard your heart so that what you are going through doesn't take you to a space where you think God is absent? Because God ain't never absent. God ain't never asleep. God is never distant. Much of what you think is determined by what's in your heart. Your intellect is controlled by your heart. People don't follow what they think. People often follow what they feel. And what they feel informs what they do. So the issue for your heart becomes two things. How much access are you allowing to it? And to who are you giving that access? If I was you, I would tell them, ... Let me tell you how to handle this situation, says the one that's broke trying to give you financial advice. How much access are you allowing to your heart? And to whom are you giving that access? I ain't never been in a relationship, but let me tell you how to handle yours. Don't even pay my rent most of the time. Let me tell you how to buy a house. I can't get no help. I can't get no help, Doug. I'm trying to. The writer doesn't say listen to whoever for advice. Pay attention to what I say. My mother used to tell me, let me give it to you a different way. You ever been in a situation where you're a parent with your child and one of your child's friends is with y'all with their parent, and they letting their child do all kinds of wilding out? Their child doing whatever. And it forces you to have to say, am I talking to anybody in here? When so-and-so does that, don't you do that. Because I know that's what their parents say, but here's what I say. All I'm trying to get you to see is if you would stop paying attention to what everybody else is telling you, all the consultation that everybody else is giving you, all the advice that somebody else is giving you, and listen to what God says. And don't let it out of your sight. Because the word of God is a lamp for my feet. Let me give it to you in church speak. And a light for my pathway. All right, I'm done. Let me close this out. We're in a process in my family of trying to get our finances and our business affairs in order. Y'all know I love gadgets. So anything I can do on a computer, that's where I want to do it. I want to do it on a computer. I want to do it on an iPhone. I want to do it on an iPad. Tracy, on the other hand, likes pen and paper. I ain't tell y'all to clap for that. She likes pen and paper. And so, not long ago, I had started keeping certain records and files in the computer. And I told Tracy where the information was, because she wanted to write it down with pen and paper. Told y'all I got issues. And I told her, well, it's on the computer. And she says to me, well, you didn't give me access. And this is what I'm trying to get somebody to see. I'm sorry, honey. I thought I had given you access. And she corrected me. No, you never gave me access, so I can't get the information. Unless you give God complete access, unless you let God have complete control, God does not have a co-navigator feature. God is either going to be in charge or God is not going to be in charge. You better be hot or you better be cold, because this in-between thing don't work for God. And let me tell you how hot God is about you. He sent his son. We back on Easter, ain't we? They called him Jesus. He came to love, heal, and forgive. And because he lives, I know resurrection was last week, but because he lives, I can face tomorrow. Because he lives, all fear is gone. Because I know who holds my future, and his resurrection power is accessible to you if you would give him access.
Thanks for watching and joining us in worship. To discover more about New Bethel, visit our website to get connected.